Welcome, welcome. I think your heart's wide open now, ready to receive. Right? I'm Reverend Cindy Grimes, and I am thrilled to be here this morning. It's been, a solid month at least since we've had a regular service here in our space. We had service last week, but it was a little different, like I like to say. But today is a more traditional service, and so nice to see some of our visitors back. And we have a couple of first-time visitors, and we're so glad to have you here. And a special shout-out to my friend and fellow minister, Reverend Teresa Bieber. Teresa, stand up. That's my sister from another mister right there. She is with us this morning because we are going to a minister's retreat. We're leaving after service, and we'll be gone till Friday. And I'll just be bringing back some more, be more filled and more overflowing, and have more to share with all of you. So, again, welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, now I think I can speak again. I'm so glad I watched that yesterday. I got a lot of my tears out, so I could get up here and speak after hearing that again this morning. All right, today we're talking about safety, the paradox of safety. Yeah, here we go. What that means, if you've been coming for a while, you understand that every month we are doing a different value that Centers for Spiritual Living holds dear, and that we all as an organization believe in and hold dear. So our value for this month is living as safety, love as safety. And what that means for us is that we create a community-wide climate conducive to honest reflection and deep and direct communication. The concept of safety, now in spiritual terms, rests on the understanding of spirit as being everywhere present, an understanding which thereby reduces stress and promotes a sense of belonging in this world. This is indeed our temporary home. So my spin on this. I guess this isn't working. Or it's not on. Okay. Safe place. Safe place. A sanctuary is a safe place. Before being the minister here, I was a workshop facilitator for about 7 years in the realm of child welfare. And the number one thing that I always did before doing a workshop or a class or a presentation was to establish safe space. It is absolutely vital that people feel safe in the space where they're going to share, so that they can open their hearts, so that they can learn, so that they can understand and take things in. It is vital to me that this place, that Oak Brook Center for Spiritual Living, is a sanctuary for people, so that folks from all walks of life and whatever they've been through can come in here and know that this is a place where they can truly be themselves and they can truly be safe. And that's an important value for our organization all around, and I'm thrilled to see it in our list, in our prime list for this year, that it is something that is absolutely essential, that people feel safe. That's the way that we learn and we grow. If we don't, then that becomes impossible. And I'm going to be talking about that in different facets of it over the next month. Now it's working, because I didn't have it on before. Okay. So love as safety. Today we're talking about the paradox of safety. And now what I'm trying to say with that will make itself more clear as I speak this morning. Next week we're going to talk about the idea of being safe in spirit, and the fact that we are really and truly always safe, though we may not always feel that way. We are here to learn how to open ourselves more to that feeling that is with us, that always has been, that safety, and knowing that this is our temporary home, and that there is this other realm of where we are always safe, that there is nothing to fear, that there is no danger. We're going to talk about that next week. And then we're going to talk about how sometimes fear comes up. Even though intellectually you may know that you have nothing to be afraid of, there's still something that may be rolling around in your gut, or as you start something new, fear is something that is going to come up, right? Just like weeds that come into a garden, you don't try to grow weeds, they just show up. When we do something new, when we step out, when we take risks, fear is going to show up. So we're going to talk about how to move from fear to faith. The next part of the paradox of safety, we're going to talk about how we are actually most safe when we are vulnerable. And there's the paradox. So that's coming as well. And then we're going to talk about how we become safe people. How do we carry that sense of safety all around us so that people who come into our presence know that we are a safe person? And they too then can open up and live to their potential and live and learn and grow like we all want to do. Because ultimately, that's what we all are. We are all light seekers. We're all light bringers, each and every one of us. And would that be a useful thing for you, right? To be out in the world and for people to know that you are a safe person. Right? Would that be something useful for you? Absolutely, absolutely. We're here to be the change that we want to see. And I think a lot of people are feeling unsafe in our world these days. So we're here to lead the way, to show that example. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the psychology behind safety a little bit and how that works for us as human beings. Now you've seen this before. If you've been here, you've seen it because I've shown it to you before. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It takes about a half dozen different theories of psychology and puts them all together in that graph. The part that's really important for me today, we're going to be toward the bottom of the pyramid. And Maslow said this: I think of the self-actualizing man not as an ordinary man with something added, but rather as an ordinary man with nothing taken away. Right? The self-actualized man. The self-actualized person is the person who is living life to its fullest. Right? Fearless. Just sucking the marrow and the joy and every ounce of juice out of life that they can get. That's where I want to be. That's where I am often, frequently. Not always, but we're all a work in progress, aren't we? Is that where we all want to be? Yes, we want to be at the top of that pyramid. Well, in order to get to the top of that pyramid, there have to be some things in place. There has to be a foundation. And the very, very foundational things for all of us human beings are our creature needs and necessities. We need air to breathe, right? We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need clothing, and we need sleep. How many of you were reminded of this during the hurricanes, right? As you lost your power, as you lost water, I know it became very, very apparent to me what things I need at the very basic necessities. What do I need to be happy? And air conditioning is very helpful. It's not an absolute necessity. Now, when we lost water, I realized how necessary water is. Right? So those things have to be in place. Think about a child who's in school and the teacher is teaching them some science or some history, something about the 1700s or whatever, and this kid hasn't eaten, or they haven't slept the night before, right? Or they're feeling sick. How much are they going to learn? How much can you learn? Right? Anybody else get hangry? You know how that is when you get hangry? I live with a hangry. Somebody who gets hangry. When he is hungry, nothing else goes in, right? He's got to have his food, and then we can talk, right? And some of you, I know you have to have your coffee in the morning before you can speak to people and be civil. We all have these needs. They're at the bottom of the pyramid. When you take care of that, you can move on to the next thing. So we all need shelter. We all need shelter. But shelter could be a space under a bridge, right? And that's not what any of us want. So that takes us to the next level of the pyramid, which is safety and security. In order for a person to really feel safe and secure, they have to have health. They want employment or a way for money to come in, right? So they can live. We all need that. We all need some money from somewhere. If you're not working, you get a retirement income, but everyone needs that in this world. We live someplace, right? You have family and social stability. Now, when people have these things in place, they can move on then to the next level, which is to feel love and belonging. So back to our child in school, if the parents were up all night fighting, you know, how ready are they going to be to move on to the next things? Are they going to care much about their creativity or their spontaneity? Right? or meaning or inner potential. People don't care about those things when these other basic needs have not been met. So we all have a need for security. Now I've got 2 new grandbabies, and it's been so fun to watch them. I think about my own kids and when they were little, how kids need to see you. They need to know that mom and dad are there, right? And when they know that you're there, then they can go off and they can wander and they can explore and they can look. But they always want to look back and see, is mom still there? Yeah. If mom's there, everything's good, then they can go on and explore some more. Their world becomes a little bigger. When my daughter Jessica was little, I remember being at Silver Springs with my husband, and she went out. She's my daring one, would go out into the water and you know, get in by her, up almost over her head. But she'd be having a good old time. You know, she could look back and see us. And at one point, I could see the panic in her. And she started looking around. She couldn't figure out where we were. And started crying. So then we ran up, put arms around her and carried her. And she was like, oh, it's all better now. You know, mom and dad are here. I know I'm safe. I know I'm okay. And then there's that springboard to go on to explore, because she felt that safety from within. Now this actually is borne out, there's scientific evidence of this. How many of you have heard of the 40 developmental assets? Awesome, awesome, a new crew. It was something that was talked about some years ago right here in Marion County Schools, an initiative started by Department of Children, Families, and Kids Central, trying to get people to understand this idea of these 40 developmental assets. And I'm going to read what they, not all 40, but just give you kind of an outline of what this is. The 40 developmental assets are 40 research-based positive experiences and qualities that influence a young person's development, that help them to be more caring, responsible, and productive adults. So the studies were done with, and they are still being done continuously, over 5 million children across the United States, Canada, and other countries. We're talking people of all racial backgrounds, different ethnicities, all different socioeconomic backgrounds, and this is what we have found. Their studies consistently show that the more of these assets a young person has, the less likely they are to engage in a wide variety of risky behaviors, such as problem alcohol use, violence, illicit drug use, and sexual activity. Kids who have more of these assets instilled in them are much more likely to do well in school, to be civilly engaged, and then to value diversity. The positive power of these assets is evidenced across all cultural and socioeconomic groups, which I've already told you. They are actually better predictors of high risk. They are better predictors that a person is going to thrive, whether they have these assets or not, than poverty, than family structure, or any other demographic differences. However, the average person only has about 20 of these assets. So let me tell you what some of them are and how it pertains to this conversation. There are 8 different categories. Half of them are external assets, meaning those are things that can be instilled in them by outside family, by neighbors, by teachers. The internal assets are things that they're taught when they're very young by their parents. So the internal assets are things like commitment to learning and positive values. You know, do they have integrity? Do they have a sense of honesty? Social competency. You know, do they make friends easily? Do they not? Do they have a positive sense of self-worth? Those are internal assets. And again, there's 20 of those. There's some in each category. The external assets are the support assets. Those are the security. Those are the things that make a person feel safe. That is not all of it, but that is a big piece of what the external assets are. So we have support. Do the kids know that there are people that care about them? Right? Not just at home, but is there another adult besides their parents that they can go to when they're in trouble? Do they feel like they're safe when they're in school? Do they feel like the neighborhood cares about them? Empowerment questions. How safe do the kids feel at school and at home? And what is their perception of how they are appreciated and valued? Boundaries and expectation. that also goes into that feeling of security. The reason that we put boundaries, the reason we have our rules in our families and with our kids is so they can feel safe. They know how far out they can go before there's that limit that says, okay, you can do this, but you can't do that. This is why we set boundaries in our children, so that they feel a sense of internal safety. And then the last thing is constructive use of time. I have a handout on this. I will make it available if you would like to. I'm not going to give it to you now because you'll start reading it. So 40 different things. There is a way to go online at the Search Institute and see how many of these things, if you have children, and it will make you more conscious, I guess. You know, when I thought about the things that I was putting my kids in, whether it was Boy Scouts or sports or something like that, you look at the assets and you see that putting your child on a sports team or having them in a youth group at church really takes care of about a half dozen of these different assets, which is what we want for our kids, right? We all want our kids to be healthy and happy and whole. So we want to give them every advantage we can. And this is one of those things to do it. A couple of months ago, I talked about my experience in being at the Rape Science Training Institute. And the facilitator of this workshop asking everyone in the room if they had been, how many people had been abused as children. And in that room, we had sex offenders. It was about half the room, maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 people. The other half of the room was the helpers, the therapists, and the social workers, and the nurses, and the doctors. And the facilitator first asked the side of the room with the offenders, how many of you have been abused as children? And what would you guess of the number of hands going up? Almost all of them. Almost all of them went up. Then she looked over at the other side, at the helpers, and she asked them, how many of you were abused as children? And I sat and I watched as, how many hands would you guess went up in that room? Almost all of them. It was mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling. But it just went to show that here is a terrible thing that can happen to somebody. It's happened to many people. And some people will go this direction, and some people will go that direction. And I spent the rest of my professional career, that happened, I don't know, 25 years ago, longer than that, even maybe 30, that I attended that workshop, and for years and years and years, I looked for the answer to that. What makes the difference? This is what makes the difference. Children having these assets and these qualities and these experiences instilled in them when they're young so that they have a better chance of going the right direction. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to be that this is the only thing. Certainly there are lots of other factors, but again, we want to give our families and our kids and our communities the best advantage that we can. So that's the 40 different so that they can go out and explore the world and live that feeling of safety and security. Physical well-being. Your physical well-being is vital. You need to know that the space that you're going into is physically safe. I also remember when my kids were in high school, this is several years ago, and there was a time there, a spurt, where there were a lot of school shootings happening. And I remember my kids coming home from school and saying where they had decided to sit in that classroom based on how close, what the proximity to the windows and the proximity to the doors, because they had to know how to get out of there if there was ever an active shooter. And I'm like you, Gail, like, oh my God, that is something that never occurred to me as a child. Yes, we had fire drills. We even had bomb drills, which didn't make any sense. You're going to get under a desk like that's going to save you from a bomb. Anyway, we had those when I was growing up, but we didn't have kids worried about where the doors were and the exits were so they could get out in case somebody was shooting. So it just mind-boggling, right? So how does a kid learn in that kind of situation? Right? What if someone is bullied? How do they learn then if they're always worried about their physical safety? Right? So vital that people feel safe. Ooh. I don't know what I did.
Uh-oh.
Can you turn it back on? I hit some button. There we go. Thank you. The next thing is employment. How important it is for the individual, right? How scary is it when you lose your job? Has anybody ever lost a job? Right? And then you're thinking, how in the heck am I going to make ends meet? Not just for myself, but my family. You know, we need to know that we can have that income coming in. Yes, we're spiritual people, but you know, you still got to pay the bills. You still have to drive that car. You still need gasoline. So we want to have employment. That goes into feeling safe. You want to have property. You don't want to be living under a bridge. That's shelter, yes, but to have a home, to have a roof over your head, one actually that's yours feels even better. Right? I'm not sure what the number is today, but last time I looked, there were over 14,000 homeless kids right here in Marion County. How many of you knew that? Homeless. Now, this doesn't mean they're necessarily living in tents or that they're out in the forest, but maybe they're shacked up at somebody's house or they're sleeping on somebody's couch. Right? We know this situation. Yes. That's not having your own space. That's not property when you're sleeping on someone else's couch. When you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. That's not safety and security. And then family and social stability. Family and social stability. There could be any number of things that fall into that. I feel very, very blessed. You know, I was raised with both my parents. I always knew where mom was, always knew where dad was. There was never any fear in my mind of where they might be. You know, or whether there was going to be food to eat. That never even crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind. Now, my grandfather, my dad's father, was very, and they had 15 kids. Okay, living in an apartment in New York City. Poor. And my grandfather ruled his home with an iron fist. I have to say, there was probably not a lot of sense of physical well-being in their home, but the thing that they all said, even though it was not an ideal childhood by any stretch. I mean, any number of my aunts or uncles of those 15 can tell you stories growing up that were very painful for them, that spoke not of safety and security. But what they all said about my grandfather was there was always food on the table. There was always a roof over our heads. He may not have said he loved them, right? He may not have been the touchy-feely, huggy, kissy parent that maybe they would have liked to have, but there was always food on the table. And that was more than what my grandfather had. He was tossed out of his home when he was 12 years old and made to fend for himself. Right? So what he did for his was better than what was done for him. And what my parents did for me was better than what was done for them, and so on. We all try to do better, right? Don't we all do that? How many parents we have here? We all try to do better for our kids, right? Everybody. But what happens sometimes, if these needs are not met as we're growing up, we get stuck. We get stuck in a place where we're trying continuously to have those needs met in other ways. And it shows up as fear and insecurity. Right? You know anybody like that? That overcompensation? Well, I didn't have it growing up, so I'm going to make sure my kids get it, or I'm going to make sure I get it. And they spend all of their health, their wealth, their energy, their everything, just trying always to keep up with the Joneses and to have more than the next person, and so on and so forth. You know, people like this, right? We get stuck. That becomes the thing now. Instead of going for that self-actualization, we're just trying to feel safe and secure. It also shows up with this. It also shows up this way because they never really feel safe. How many guns does it take for a person to feel safe? Right? How thick do the walls have to be? How many walls do we need to build so that we can feel safe? Right? But it doesn't work. That's the problem. It doesn't work because you're looking for the safety in the wrong place. Now, I can tell you some people who actually were very safe. I was reminded of this during the storm. Well, actually, after the storm, when I went to the prison, I think it was just last week, or the week before, I don't know. One night I went over to the prison, it was after the storm, and I asked the guys how they fared through the storm. We're over at the work camp, and they said it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. But one of the gentlemen said, I realized that we were probably the safest people there were during that storm. Right? We were in these buildings and nothing was going to come through. He said the lights flickered and the electricity went right back on. We always had water. We had plenty of food because the guards came and they gave us our meals to make sure that we had food to eat during the storm. Now they weren't comfortable. They were sleeping on cots on the floor. They moved everyone from the work camp over to the main unit. But they were very safe. And they knew they were safe. They felt that. Maximum security. Maximum security. The safest place you can ever find is a prison. What's missing in that prison now? What's missing for those people?
Love.
Love, freedom. Freedom, right? How many people give up their freedom so that they can have that safety? That safety that they feel like they somehow maybe missed out on when they were kids. And it may not be a conscious thought. They're not consciously thinking, well, I missed out on this, that, and the other. Therefore, I'm going to compensate. I'm going to make sure we're always safe. Right? By having lots of weapons and lots of money. You know? For some people, it doesn't matter how much you have. It doesn't matter how much you have. You will never feel safe. You know, people who have died, Howard Hughes comes to mind. Right, one of the richest men that ever was, and he died miserable and lonely because it was never enough. Trying to fill a void with what is never going to fill it. Ironically, in a changing world, playing it safe is one of the riskiest things you can do. That is from one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. We know this, right? We know that we have all those phrases. You know, ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for. So what happens if maybe there wasn't food, shelter, or basic necessities in your home when you were growing up? That's probably the case for lots of people. Or maybe your home wasn't the safe place. You know, we like to think that home is a safe place, but that is not the case for everyone. Sometimes home is the most dangerous place. And maybe that was the case for you. Maybe you're somewhere along that continuum. Or maybe life wasn't stable. You know, maybe through no fault of anyone in particular. Someone lost a job, someone died, there was a divorce, things happened. And there was not that sense of stability in your home when you were growing up. You know, and maybe just somehow you keep getting to certain levels of success and you feel yourself self-sabotage, or you find yourself spending more time than you want to in that job that you hate, but it pays the bills and it puts a roof over your head. And you're trading your freedom for that security, for a feeling of security, right? How many of us are in that situation? And what's the cure? Is there a cure? Well, I wouldn't be taking you down this road if there wasn't one. Some of us, actually, I threw in that graphic for those of you who were here for the cracked pot talk. Right? People walking around feeling like they're forever wounded. Like I am forever a cracked pot. Everybody knows it, and it will never be fixed. I felt like that the first time I walked into this sanctuary 13 years ago. Like I was never going to be whole because there were so many screwed up things that happened. How could I be, you talk about perfection. You don't know my life. Right? You don't know my life. And I know that's the truth for a lot of people here. But here is the fact. We can change that. We can change that. Past is not precedent. Your past does not have to dictate your future. Now, I read a poem a couple of weeks, well, I guess it was over a month ago now, when we did our baby dedication. Do y'all remember Your Children Are Not Your Children? By Khalil Gibran. Well, I rewrote it, and I call it your parents are not your parents. And it goes like this. Your parents are not your parents, for you are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. You came through them, but not from them. And though they are with you always, you belong not to them. They tried to give you their love and maybe even their thoughts, not always appreciating that you had thoughts of your own. They may have housed your body, but never your soul. For souls all dwell in the house of tomorrow, which any and all can visit even in their dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek more to be the real you. For life goes not backwards nor tarries with yesterday. Parents are the bows from which their children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends the bow with his might, that his arrows would go swift and far. Let the bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. So the archer, closer is he than breathing, and nearer than hands and feet. There is a spirit. There is the spirit that runs in and around and through all things. That is at the very center, the very heart of who you are. And you can access this and you can feel this as often and as much as you want. Problem is, when we're out there in the world and we're so busy doing and making money and doing all that, we forget. We forget. But there are things we can do to remind ourselves. I personally, my moments are out in nature, and lately when I hold my grandbabies, my brand new grandbabies, right? A brand new human being, right? Perfect, pure, innocent, just gorgeous. And I sit there and I hold this baby, and I love them so much. And I was struck the other day with the idea of, oh my gosh, as much as I love this baby, God loves me more. Right? That baby that is innocent and pure. God looks at us the same way. That there is absolutely nothing you could do, nothing you could say, no mistake you can make that is too great. It doesn't matter. Right? We are as children. We are as those babies. When you compare us to the creative essence that flows in and around and through everything. And when we can feel ourselves in that place, we can feel safe. We can know that we are always safe, that we always have everything that we need, that there will never be a circumstance that comes up that is too great for you, because you have every resource within you at your fingertips. Principle is not bound by precedent. There are principles that we live by. There are principles that run this universe, laws of nature, so to speak. One of those is, according to your faith, be it done unto you. So basically what happens to us, what we experience as life, is what we expect. It's what we believe is going to happen. It's what we believe we are worthy of. It's what we believe is possible. So if you've got all this baggage hanging over you, of the past, of I didn't have it, I didn't have the money I needed, or I didn't have the stability, or my parents didn't love me, or go on and on and on and on. It can set you up for a belief system that will perpetuate those same cycles. So it's not easy. You may have some work to do to release some of that stuff, but it is possible, and it is what we're here to do. It is what we are here to do. Your Father knows what things you need even before you ask. And that's the truth. We did a little prayer here. We did a Taizé session before the hurricane. And one of the parts of the prayer was that we would have, that everyone here and that everyone whose lives we touched, all of our loved ones, would have everything they need even before they know they need it. So we get home, and the storm started, I guess it was the next morning, and I realized, darn it, we were out of animal food, we're out of cat food. And the stores are closed. What are we going to do? There's no cat food. So I go out into the garage for something else, and I'm looking for something completely different. And what do I find in some cabinet but a bag of cat food? It's like Spirit knew we needed the cat food, even though I didn't know we needed the cat food, and there it was. So yes, Spirit knows what you need even before you speak it. It's a question of how open are we to receiving that and to seeing that. So here is our affirmation. This conversation will continue. This conversation will continue over this next month as we talk about how do we really feel that sense of safety within us. Now you know what your blocks may be or may have been to that feeling so that you can release it and really come into that knowing of I have everything I need. I am safe and secure right now in all ways. So would you join me in our affirmation?